And we've got some samples of this addendum for you all. What we've been doing and what's been helping us is we fill this out for one of our houses when we know it's going to be going to appraisal. And in our case, this specific addendum is made to give, it's called Residential Green and Energy Efficient Addendum. So if you've got a resale where the people have put in new windows, or you have a resale where they've redone their heating and cooling system, this can help you get value for that as compared to the house 2 doors down that's trying to be sold that hasn't been updated. This can help you. And you know, the trick, of course, is getting it into the appraiser's hand and those taking the time to actually look at it and include it in their addendum. But this is a good tool. Don't you feel it's helped us?
It's a good tool. Yeah, they appreciate it when we copy them.
So there's a couple copies of it here. Oh, yeah, here you go. Copies here. And if anybody, here you go, y'all can pass it. If anybody doesn't get one or wants to talk about it a little bit more, Ginger will be happy to visit with you on it. I'd be glad to talk with you about it. Where's Curtis?
He might have stepped out to the model. Okay.
Curtis Grant. Many of you may know Curtis. He's been in these real estate circles in our area for quite some time. But Curtis is part of our company too, and he specializes in a lot of our off-site. If you've got a lot out somewhere, you've got somebody that wants to live out in what we call off-site, so it's not in one of our traditional neighborhoods, Curtis works with a lot of those folks. So what I want to talk to you about a little bit this morning, of course, we want you to sell our homes, but I hope more than that you get out of this things that will help you across the board. Some of the things you're looking at in here is obviously it's insulated. This is, we call it high density green fiber insulation. It's not, in the old days, it's a form of cellulose insulation. Some of you may remember there was a time in the past, in the 80s and such, when cellulose was being utilized, there was issues with it that it would tend to settle over time. The adhesives and the methods of installation have gotten quite a bit better. As an experiment, I don't know, what was that, about 8 months ago, a year ago?
Yeah.
As an experiment, Ginger and I went into our model home, which at that time was about 3.5 or 4 years old, and we turned on the video camera and we got our sheetrocker and we cut a hole, 2 of them in fact, to see what had happened with the cellulose, and it didn't drop at all. It was tight as the day that we put it in there, so we felt pretty good about that. The benefits of the cellulose is that you get a lot of R value per inch. It actually has more R value than the blown in foam. Is everybody starting to hear a little bit about foam? Full encapsulation. Okay, we'll talk about that a little bit too, because I want you to know and understand, be able to respond to questions about that for your buyers. The foam, not quite so much relevant to your resales. Someday they'll figure out a system to be able to go in and retrofit that, but it's a little difficult. But at any rate, the cellulose that we use provides a pretty strong R value for the houses. One thing we have to consider as the houses get tighter and tighter, in other words, as they get more airtight, one of the things that's the government through the Energy Star, Homes for Living, Environments for Living, all these energy programs have pushed the industry to create houses that are more airtight. In doing that, we have to be concerned about indoor air quality. And so what is happening, what you can talk to your buyers about if they have those concerns, is what we do, and most builders are starting to do this. We've been doing this for quite some time. We have a fresh air supply that comes into the house. In this case, there's an inlet right out here on the patio, runs in this ductwork back over to the furnace. The thermostat, it's got a little brain in it that works with the heating and cooling system. And it'll say to itself, it's a little bit, we need some humidity control. And we haven't exchanged enough CFMs of air lately. So it'll open a damper, pulls in air, fresh air from outside, mixes it with the heated and cooled air for heat exchange, so you don't lose that much efficiency. You are losing some efficiency because you're having to heat or cool that air. But that's how you control the indoor air quality. That in conjunction with the high performance filters that are required by most of the energy programs that you know of. Of course, there's always different levels of compliance. We'd be glad to discuss those with you individually if you want. On our particular homes, we use a very high efficiency media filter that filters out microscopic particles. It's a really good system. What it really means for the people living in the house, a little less dusting, higher indoor air quality. Just got to change them, because people don't change them near enough. So if you haven't changed it, make your note to change yours at home. The other thing I wanted to mention is windows. Several years ago, it's been about 10 years ago, the government started mandating low E windows in houses. Okay, and that was a great step. There isn't a new builder that you guys are working with that doesn't do low E glass. There are in the resales, if the house in this area, I can only speak to what I know about in Texas, but in this area, if the house is any newer than about 9 years or so, 9-10 years, in most cases it's going to have low E glass in it. It should, because that's about the time the law kicked in. Then certainly people who've had put in new windows, they're going to have that type of glass too. These particular windows that we use, there is a sticker on the windows, on all new windows, talks about U factor and solar heat gain. Solar heat gain, what it means is, hey, how much of the sun's heat do these windows allow to come in? Conversely, when it's cold out, how much heat goes out? But really, where we all live, what we really care about is 9 months of the year when it's hot. Really, that's how our houses are designed to perform when it's hot. And that's evolved over time. A lot of these energy programs, for instance, Energy Star, when it first came out, those were really designed for, it seemed like, a lot up in the Northeast. But as those programs evolve, they start making compensation for what part of the country they're in. But at any rate, the hotter it gets, the better our houses perform, because that's what we design them for. Solar heat gain, the lower number, the better. U factor, it's basically a measure of the resistance of heat transfer. Solar heat gain and U factor. The lower the better on both these numbers. It's a real easy way to compare apples to apples.
What's the range that's typical and best?
The most of these windows, which is among the highest performing windows that you're going to see in these class of houses, and by what I mean by this class of house is anything from about the high 2s on up to about 800 in Dallas. In that general area, you're generally going to have a double pane window. We all know that, right? They're all going to have a high performance glass. Some of the glass is better than others. This glass is made in Waxahachie, a company called Cardinal Glass. So you have the window manufacturer that really makes the frames, and they buy their glass from the glass companies, okay? Most of them are going to be in the low 0.20, 0.23. The solar heat gains are going to be around the 0.3, maybe a 2.28. But you're going to be somewhere 0.2 to 0.3 is the general range. We're going to find both of those numbers most of the time. There are builders that are using windows that don't quite fall in that range as much as others, but you know that's why you study and due diligence to know who you might be talking about. We don't believe in negative selling, and so we all know that doesn't get us anywhere with our buyers. These all have vinyl frames. Remember, years past, the vinyl windows kind of got off to a bad start because they would yellow, and they would crack, they would sag. That's gone away. They've gotten a lot better with the vinyl that they're making. We have virtually no issues. We went all vinyl. Was that about 2 years ago? 2 years ago. We went to all vinyl about 2 years ago, and that was a tough decision because it cost us at that time when we ran the numbers on this class of houses, cost us anywhere from $1,500 to $1,800 more a house. And I know you all know when you're talking about a $350,000 house or $400,000 house, it doesn't sound like much, but when you got 80 line items, every dime counts.
What advantage did you get going to vinyl windows?
The advantage of vinyl over aluminum, when I'm talking about compared to aluminum, aluminum is a much better conductor of heat transfer. And that's what we don't want. How many of y'all have seen or been in a situation where someone has windows and they're sweating on the inside during the winter? That will not happen to anywhere near the degree with the vinyl window, because the inside surface of the vinyl window stays closer to the temperature inside the room, thus closer to the temperature of the air in the room. The aluminum windows, just like a Coke can sitting when it's cold on a hot day, it's going to sweat, or vice versa. Okay, but that's the advantage. Has anybody got a question? Because I really, if you tell us or ask us something you come up against, we can help you. Because again, I appreciate you coming here. We want you to sell our houses, but the real value is how can it help you guys, whether it's a new house or a resale. Okay. Maybe anybody had clients talk to them about SEER rating on their heating and cooling?
Absolutely.
Okay. SEER rating is an important number. It's easy for people to grasp. Hey, I got a 12 SEER, I got a 14, I got a 10, whatever it may be. It's an easy thing to grasp. It is important. So what happened, the government mandated pushing up the SEER ratings over the last several years. It used to be, 6 years ago, 10, they were all going, they were all 10s basically going in, a SEER rating of 10. Now it's gone up a little higher, it's 12 and 13. And it's not uncommon to see builders installing 14 SEER. A lot of your resales, if they've had their heating and cooling system done, they probably got at least a 14. Does that sound about right? Okay. Some of your buyers may also get what's called a variable speed furnace. Okay, sometimes they'll call it a multi-speed. What it is, it's a variable speed furnace. What those do, and this is, in my opinion, once you reach a certain, if you get a reasonably high SEER, like a 12 or a 14, so you get a 14, then before you spend much more dollars, I think you ought to be looking at getting a variable speed. Why variable speed? Variable speed allows your cooling, and we'll talk, it is cooling and heating, but let's just talk cooling. Allows your cooling system to run at a lower speed. You're like, how does that work? Well, it burns less energy. The ideal cooling system would run all the time. It would never turn off. It's kind of counterintuitive, right? Yeah. But it burns the most energy when it's starting up. Okay, when it's ramping up. When the jet's taking off the runway, it's burning a lot of fuel. When it's up in the air, just cruising along, it's not burning as much. Same thing for your system. So they have the ability to run at a lower speed for a longer period of time. It filters the air because it's pushing it all through the house. In fact, I know some people that have had allergy concerns have actually wired their variable speed system to run at the low speed 24/7. The compressor will kick off and on for cooling, but the fan never stops. It's because it's constantly filtering the air. The other benefit of that is it distributes air more evenly through the house. Okay, so the variable speed systems are very important. They don't always run at the low speed. They have the ability to. And what tells them what speed to run at is their processor. They'll say, okay, this is a temperature they want me to get to. I need to get there in X amount of time. I need to run a little faster, run a little higher. But then when it gets there, it shuts down, ramps back down, uses less energy, heat and cools the air very efficiently. By running longer, it removes humidity from the air. Think about this. What we really care about in the house is comfort, not temperature. So that's why with less humidity in the air, you can have your thermostat set at a higher temperature, but you're still comfortable. Okay. Another benefit with the tighter house, you get more humidity buildup in the house. So you want a system that will run and remove the humidity to avoid nasty things like mold, right? The clammy feeling in the house. That's why the variable speed systems are so important. In the desert at night, it feels colder. Why? Because it's not humid. But same thing in the house. Less humidity, the house is more comfortable at a higher temperature. So the variable speed systems are a good idea. If you have a homeowner that is wanting to put their house on the market, you can talk to them. If they know they need to upgrade their heating and cooling system because it's limping along, you can talk to them about, give them advice of what they need to look for. And not only that, when they do it and they follow your advice, you'll be able to talk to the selling agent or your own clients that you bring into your listing. You can talk to them about why this house is better, and by God, they better buy it now. So, anything? Anybody? Yes, ma'am.
An AC guy I talked to recently said that more important than SEER is EAR, and that could you make that
energy
distinction?
efficiency rating? The SEER rating is seasonal energy efficiency rating. The EAR takes into account a few more variables, and what happens is, and we actually have some verbiage on our paperwork, of course, the proverbial small print. Here in our conversation, I'm glad you asked that because I would have forgotten this. In our conversation, I'm talking about SEER. Hey, it's a 16 SEER unit. By the way, we use 16 SEER variable speed in all of our houses. 16 SEER, 1600 series. The energy efficiency rating gives a little clearer picture because the SEER rating, you could have two houses with the exact same equipment, and the efficiency of the actual SEER rating is going to be slightly different due to factors like length of the ductwork run or other factors. The energy efficiency rating takes more of that into account. It's just like a more detailed SEER rating, and it encompasses the whole system.
And what numbers constitute a good rating on a house?
Anybody that's how do I kind of say, new homes, our standards are different than an existing home, and of course existing home by the age, but most houses, if it's within the last decade that it was built, I think it's reasonable to expect, if it has original equipment, it's reasonable to expect that it have a minimum of a 10 in it. And any newer than that, about last 8 years, 7, 8 years, a 12, you should be looking at 12s. I really think most of the builders that are active in our general area are probably in line with that. Most of them do not use variable speed. They offer it as an option, but most of them don't. And the reason why is more people ask about SEER and EAR. More people ask about SEER than think or know to ask about variable speed. And of course, you know, the market goes to the path of least resistance. People are asking for it. We're trying to, that's why we display electric bills on our website and in our houses, because that's where the rubber meets the road. We want people to know this is the real life. It's not some theory. We're not guaranteeing you. You heard the guaranteed programs, right? Where they're guarantee your electric bill. Does anybody really think they're guaranteed your electric bill? It's fine print. They're guaranteeing a certain, it's a mathematical equation. They're guaranteeing a certain amount of kilowatt usage for a given time period. That's really all that is. But what really matters is, hey, what are your bills actually going to be when people are living in the house and kids are going in and out the door, and the doggy door gets stuck open. So that's what's happening there. Did that help you on your ear question? Okay. I have to look at my notes. Thank you for bearing with me.
You want to talk about the wall system? You've talked about insulation,
sure.
and then we could do that.
Okay. Tyvek. Everybody's pretty familiar with Tyvek. Okay. Tyvek came out with a new program. We all are used to seeing the silver decking, right? And a bunch of your resales, if they had a good salesman that hit that house and could get the insurance company to eat part of it, they probably redecked their roofs. And a lot of them may have redecked it with a radiant barrier decking. It's real easy to see. Go up in the attic and look, and if it's silver and shiny, it's a radiant barrier decking. So we're all familiar with that, right? It helps reflect the sun's radiant heat. You have conductive heat, you have radiant heat, you have airflow that can move heat in and out. That reflects the sun's heat. Well, what's happened, the house wrap has now evolved to where they thought, that's working pretty good. So Tyvek came out with what they call Thermowrap. We use it on all our houses. It, of course, shields the house against moisture intrusion, wind, drafts, helps seal it against that. But beyond that, it has a radiant barrier melded to it. So not only full encapsulation does is, let me put this in my pocket. full encapsulation pushes that insulation up to the rafters, and they blow the foam and it sticks to the decking. On the underside of the decking, it's foamed. What you've done, you've moved what they call the insulative envelope of the house, which has traditionally been from the ceiling down and the walls in. Now it's from the roof deck down. The idea being that your equipment, your ductwork is all now in what they call conditioned space. Even though there's not a duct up there blowing out hot, warm, or cool air, that being that the insulation is up at the roof deck, that attic stays closer to the temperature of the house. That's what's going on there. So when your buyers, if they ask you about full encapsulation, that's the type of system they're talking about, okay? What we do in our houses is a standard. We're blowing this high density green fiber insulation. The reason we don't do foam right now, we got to make choices. The market's getting closer, the foam's getting less expensive, but it's not there yet where I can build a house like this, cover up the foam with sheetrock, and have a buyer believe and spend the extra money to get it. Hopefully someday that'll happen. Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely. Yes, sir.
Full encapsulation, you're making the whole home, including the roof, tight. Do you have, I mean, is there any concern or any issues with the roof rotting?
There, interesting you would bring that up. There was, actually, I'll back up just a little bit. When radiant decking came out, the industry, the roofing industry, amazingly enough, led by Owens Corning, who made the pink insulation, said, hey, it's going to melt our roofs, it's going to make them crack, and they're not going to be able to warranty them. Well, that never happened. The foam, you're pushing the insulative envelope up to the roof deck. It doesn't increase the temperature of that outside roof. We're not seeing any trouble with that. And you don't really hear much from the manufacturers going that route anymore. The concern is that, go ahead, I'm sorry.
I was just going to say that, do you still vent the eaves?
No, you don't. This is what we do. You don't vent the eaves because that would destroy the envelope, so to speak. But a concern with full encapsulation homes, very much like I mentioned here, we have the fresh air intake. In a full encap home, it's important. It's for the same reasons. That's very important. And what you do, you have the fresh air intake, and you make sure that the heating and cooling system, primarily cooling, is sized correctly so that it runs long enough to remove humidity out of the home. A foam house, they're almost idiot-proof. When you foam a house, it tightens it up, seals all the little cracks and joints. On a more traditionally insulated home like this, what we have to do, our job is to make it as tight as we can. We have to put the Tyvek on the house, we tape the seams, we foam areas that we need to foam to seal it all up. But with a full end cap, it's like I say, it's almost idiot proof. So you got to make sure that they have the mechanical air exchangers and that they have right sized cooling equipment to control the humidity, and in some cases you might need to install a dehumidifier, okay, or a fancier term for this fresh air intake. It's called an ERV, Energy Recovery Ventilator. It's just a little more sophisticated design with multiple intakes from outside the house and multiple inputs inside the house to bring in fresh air. It has a heat exchanger in it. Those units can cost, they can add $1,400, $1,200 to a system. Whereas the fresh air intake that we're using that's tied in, it costs a fraction of that. Yes. Yes, sir.
So what if somebody wanted to foam a house that's a pre-existing house, say 2002, 2004, something like that, already has the units in there? Can they add something, maybe a dehumidifier to the unit to make those units work?
They could do that. The concern would be, one, if you're retrofitting a house with foam, you could access most of the rafters. To access the walls, of course, you got to remove sheetrock. Then you would also need to, as you mentioned, you would need to do away with the soffit vents and the roof ridge vents or the air hawks that are up on the roof, because you don't vent a full encapsulated attic. And then also, my concern would be what happens when you insulate a home to the standards that we have the ability to do today, these houses that we're doing with the cellulose, the full encapsulation foam houses, we have to downsize the units from what you used to put in. And that would be a concern
So
on
the
retrofit.
tonnage, you downsize the tonnage.
Yes, that's what I meant. I'm sorry, thank you. Yes, you would downsize the tonnage. I'll explain that briefly because, you know, especially in Texas, right? Bigger is better, more is better. When I did my first foam house, I did the walls in McKinney. I did it 13 years ago as an experiment. I experiment on my own house a lot more than I do on my customers. Well, we knew all about the foam. We didn't know about resizing the air conditioners. And I'm telling you what, that house would get cold really fast, really, really fast. But the problem was, not only was it cold, it was clammy. I mean, it was uncomfortable. And what we learned was the units were so oversized, they do what's called short cycling. And that's what I'd be concerned about retrofitting a house with foam, if you could do that, okay? Short cycling is the air conditioner system comes up, ramps up, cools the house down, but it doesn't run long enough to remove the humidity. That's a big problem. That's where you can get mold and other issues. It can really be a trouble. So bigger is not better when it comes to tonnage. And that's a hard thing to sell. Especially when you got heating and air contractors, they're starting to come around because they don't want problems either. But those guys, you know, we're telling them, hey, we don't need as much of your product. We don't need a 5-ton unit. We only need a 3. Well, there's some resistance there, as you might imagine. And so that's the industry is going through a bit of a re-education, the heating and cooling industry, because of the tighter homes, because of the better windows, because of the radiant air. We don't need as much of their product. So it's a bit of a battle.
From a sales standpoint, just, I mean, with everything else that you offer outside of the foam insulation, isn't like the windows, if we were bringing a client to the house, I mean, that's what we're selling them on. We're selling them on the entire package. So,
Entire, yes. What else?
are there even builders out there that are doing all foam?
There are some builders that are doing all foam. In this class of home, not yet, but it's getting close. And you'll see some of the track guys in certain neighborhoods are starting to step out and do it a little bit, and that's good because it's going to make it more affordable for all of us. We have done more foam houses in the last 2 years than we've done in the previous 10. So I think you'll start seeing more and more. This system, this cellulose with the Tyvek, we get the performance rivals that of foam. The thing that could take you to a higher level of performance than what we're doing as a standard would be if we started foaming the rafters. Well, if I'm going to foam the rafters, at that point I'm real close to foaming the walls. But it's not quite there yet. You know, I would love to do it, but one of the reasons we're able to stand here today, and we're still, you know, we're here when a lot of our peers are gone, is we have to watch. I have to have economic considerations. If I can't sell it for what it's costing, we're not going to be here to provide service for the people. But it's close. It's coming. I think you'll see it. And I was slow to get on the bandwagon for full encapsulation because, you know, if you've been in this business for a long time, you see things come and you kind of wait. You know, I don't want to go through FRT, which was fire-resistant, fire-treated roof decking. Anybody remember that from about 20 years ago? When all of a sudden people would get up on their roofs and fall through it because it was deteriorating. Just was waiting to see what happened with the foam. But the foam's been around for quite a while now.
And I have
Yep.
they were selling, you know, 5 years ago the energy or the green packages for an additional upgrade of $4,000, $5,000. Is there a number that you could kind of tie in now with what you're doing? Would you even want to do that?
Probably as far as, I guess, the closest thing to do would be the Appraisal Institute that I mentioned earlier gives a figure. They say, and you don't have to help me on this because it's been a while since I looked at it, but basically what they say is, hey, for every dollar it costs less to live in a comparable house, say it costs $10 less a month to live in this house than this house. Everything else is the same. How much more is this house supposed to be worth?
I have to look it up. I have it.
I
I have it
wanna
on.
say-
I have it on the website.
I thought it was for every,
Yeah.
I'm just summarizing. We do have the information on our website. I think it was for every dollar saved, the value is up 20. That's according, not to us, the
Sure.
Appraisal Institute. So you can kind of work backwards into the number, what you're talking about. Because what we're talking about is we can give people an idea of how much less it costs to live in one of our houses versus another.
Well, and I'll just direct you to the side, of course.
I'm sorry?
I'll just direct you to the side. I just
Yeah.
wanted to, you know.
Yeah, the HERS rating, by the way, you see on your MLS form, there's a spot for HERS rating. It's a good time to talk about that briefly. Okay, this is kind of can answer your question. You're asking the buyer, a typical house built to code, a house built to the current energy code would have a HERS of 100. That's the benchmark, okay? Typical housing stock in our area, you know, our houses are a little newer than most parts of the country, okay? But typical houses in our area, existing housing stock, is somewhere in this range. All across America, the average is 140. In our area, it's somewhere in here. What that means is, if it costs $100 a month for energy in this house, it's going to cost $120 in this one. That's how these numbers tie in. Our houses, this house you're standing in, we've had a evaluation what the HERS will probably be. Most of our houses are now coming in. We advertise in this range around 70. We're actually hitting in the low 60s in many cases now.
The house next door scored a 59. The house 2 doors down scored a 57. So that's what we're doing. And you'll notice that there's several energy programs out there. You guys are shopping builders. This is important for you to be able to speak the differences, I think. So he mentioned that 100 represents a home built to code, okay? Energy Star, you've heard of that. It's been around a long time. Typically require 85. Greenbelt, North Texas, if you've heard of it, requires scores of about 83. You've heard of Environments for Living. It's a 3-tiered program. A couple of our competitors have switched over to that. The gold level, I believe it is. I'm not sure if that's right. Achieves scores of 85. The next level down achieves scores of 80, and then their best is the platinum, which scores about 70. So that's how you compare. This is apples to apples. Who's building a greener home? And we market that, like you said, that our homes will achieve scores between 65 and 80. Yet we're turning around some lower scores. There you go.
Yeah, it gives a real good read as to how you can compare houses. It's like the gas mileage sticker on the car.
What determines the score? A cumulative foot pieces and
Yes,
pieces?
exactly. They take into account briefly the orientation of the home. You have 2 exact same houses, but it matters. Is there a one face west, one face? We all have known that, right? Which way houses face. It makes a difference on your energy usage. This quantifies it. Home orientation, the type of window glass, the type of insulation, the wall assembly, what the R value is in the wall assembly. By the way, our walls are, you've heard of R13. Everybody talks about their walls being R13. The actual insulation in our walls, just the insulation portion, is in excess of a 13 and some fractions. The whole wall assembly is about a 17 or more. Pretty strong. Also, real quick, new framing construction. They make corners like this. This is the corner of a house, outside, inside corner. Now you frame them these days, what we call a California corner. See this slot? That allows you to insulate all the way up into the corner. Used to, you'd build corners differently. It would take one extra stud, and it would leave a void in the corner. They figured out how to make the corners as strong, use one less stud, and give you a space to put insulation. So that's what, if you see the term advanced framing techniques, that's what they're talking about, is to be able to insulate into the corners and a few other areas in the home of similar setups, okay? Anything else? Everybody's getting hungry.
Well, I think you should hit on engineered flooring systems versus dimensional lumber.
All right.
Smarty.
Real quick. If you look up at these 2 rooms, it's called an I-joist. Remember the commercials with the elephants that stand on, they call it a silence floor? That's what they're talking about. The benefit of these products are this. It's a engineered product. It's put together with strands of wood, unlike what we call dimensional lumber. Dimensional lumber is what's right there, okay, up at the ceiling. You would like to have this type of wood under your subfloor when you're walking around on top of it in the house. The benefit is it's less likely to bow and warp and twist. It's more stable. It's got a fatter area of which to nail the joints and the screw. It gives them more surface area to support the joints in the decking, okay? That's what we use to do this over using dimensional lumber to put something in terms of money.
Yeah.
That's a couple $1,000 deal on a typical 2-story that's about 4,500 feet with living area upstairs of about 1,600 or so. It can cost $1,500 to $2,000 more to use this kind of lumber, this engineered lumber versus dimensional lumber. If you'll notice, see where we go from engineered lumber to dimensional lumber. Dimensional lumber is just normal 2x6, 2x8. Attic space. Nobody's walking on it up above it. Nobody's living on it. Right here, they're living on it and walking around on it. That's why we use that in this area. It's something that the buyers never see, and if you don't talk about it, they won't know it. That's a big advantage to have that type of product in your house.